Story 1. This happened a few years back on Halloween night. One of my friends and I had plans to go around the neighborhood and do the usual trick-or-treating kids our age would do. We were both 12 at the time, old enough to go without our parents. I remember being pretty excited for this reason alone. It would be the first year we would be able to go trick-or-treating with just ourselves, and this allowed us to choose our route that hit all the good houses. The night was going like any other Halloween night. We didn't know what was coming our way. We got our bags halfway full when it started getting late. It was around 9 p.m. by that point, around the time people started turning off their house lights to signify they would no longer be answering the door. My friend suggested that we should head back home, but I was stubborn and wanted to take advantage of every last house we could. We ended up agreeing to visit one last street that happened to be close-ended. Now we live in a nice neighborhood, but for whatever reason, there was a huge lack of streetlights on this street. And most of the houses on this street were abandoned or had their lights off. As we continued our walk, seemingly out of nowhere, we both noticed the silhouette of a man walking towards us. Not like other trick-or-treaters, but rather some lone, full-grown man. As we got closer, we realized he was a police officer. And as we walked past him, he introduced himself. Shortly after, he pointed to a house further down the road and explained how an older man was living there who had been attempting to lure trick-or-treaters inside. He further explained that someone called the police, and that's why he was there in the first place. Throughout the short conversation, he would continually explain how his police car was just over there. Like, that's actually what he said. Just over there. And pointed in some random direction. Even at age 12, the whole encounter felt extremely unnatural. But what the officer said next caught both of us completely off guard. He said he needed to talk to the man, but that because he was a police officer, the man wouldn't open the door for him. Though he said if we knocked on the door, the man probably would open it. After the man attempted to lure us inside, the officer said he would jump out of the bushes and catch the man in the act. My friend and I just looked at each other. We were both speechless. To better put this into perspective, you need to understand just how outlandish this request was. This supposed law enforcement officer was requesting two 12-year-old kids intentionally walk up to the house of a man reported to have been luring kids inside. He was essentially asking children he had just met to act as bait. Neither of us responded for a while. Eventually, the officer broke the silence with something along the lines of how we needed to do this quickly. By this point, we hadn't even agreed yet. I wanted to speak up and say no, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. Just then, a large group of teenagers came around the bend in the street. They were heading in our direction. That's when the officer said he'd be right back and not to go anywhere. He went off in some random direction. As the group of teenagers passed us, one of them asked us if we knew that guy. We said we didn't, and briefly explained what had just happened. Concerned, the group agreed the situation was weird and offered to walk us back home. We took them up on the offer, and that was pretty much that. My friend and I wouldn't tell anyone about our experience, but over the years I've started to regret not making a bigger deal about it and reporting the situation to the police. We still don't know whether that was a real cop or not. But the older I get, the more I think it wasn't. And I mean, even if it was, putting two 12-year-olds in such a potentially dangerous situation is not acceptable as an officer of law enforcement, or as anyone for that matter. Police officer or not. I don't know what the guy's true motives were. And that thought still haunts me.
Story 2. It was the year 2015. the time when trick or treating was a fun thing to do during the peak of my childhood. My friend Anthony invited me and Dave to trick or treat together, and then stay at his house on Halloween night to watch a movie together. He had a reasonably large house outside of our town, and it was the perfect place to go trick-or-treating. As the night began, we thought it would be a perfect time to go now and get sweets for a movie night, so we had a fair share of sweets that Halloween. We were near the end of our trick-or-treating when we came across a weird house. Dave insisted that we should ring the bell of this house as well before going back home. I rang the bell, and a woman answered the door. She was tall and skinny, with shoulder-length hair. Her house was disgusting, and we could even smell the odor of cigarettes from inside. She was quick to tell us that there were no more sweets left. However, she went in to find something for us. After a couple of minutes of waiting, she comes back with an old brown paper bag with old-looking candy inside. We kindly denied the bag and told her we were getting late and Anthony's mother was there to pick us up. So we started moving backward. She grabbed Anthony and said, "No, please," but he pulled away from her, and then she quickly shut the door. We wandered the town a bit more after that, and then went straight to the parking where Anthony's mother was waiting for us. As we entered the car, that same woman came right in front of our car, threw herself on the windshield, and kept shouting, "She is taking my child! Stop her!" She was throwing herself at the car and hitting it with her fists. A couple of neighbors came out as if they knew about her condition. They seemed to know who she was and what she was doing. They apologized to us and said it was a big misunderstanding. We quickly got into the car, and my friend's mom started driving us out. We didn't get far before the woman jumped in front of the car again, claiming one of us was her child. The neighbors, once again, pulled her away. Finally, we got home and thought the nightmare had ended, but it was later that night when things truly took a dark turn. We stayed up late, like any teenagers do at sleepovers, and we watched some scary movies. Out of nowhere, the light turned on in the hall, and we heard someone walking back and forth. We could see it under the closed door of the bedroom. We assumed it was Anthony's parents who were about to come in to tell us to get some sleep. However, no one came in. I decided to have a peep out the door, but nothing at all. My friends joined me to see why the lights suddenly turned on. Out of nowhere, Dave yelled, "It's her!" As I heard him saying this, the ground slid below my feet. We dived into the situation and looked through a large window facing the backyard. And there she was, standing outside the house, below a creepy streetlight, looking right at us and sobbing mysteriously. However, the second she saw us stare at her, she ran away. Disturbed by this, we came back inside the bedroom and locked the door. We were quite shaken up by this. Who is she? What does she want? We sat around for an hour, nervous and on high alert. However, we eventually did somehow manage to fall asleep that night. The next morning, when we all were having breakfast at the table, Anthony's mom told us that she got so obsessed with that psychopathic and creepy woman in the town that it shook her up so much. She thought that she saw that woman standing over her bed in the middle of the night. All three of us, Anthony, Dave, and I, looked at each other, but we never said a thing about it. But we were certain now that the woman was in our house last night. We never told anyone that we saw that woman at the house that night, but we kept on wondering, who is she? And what is it that she wanted? And what else could have happened if we weren't awake that night? But still no answers.
Story 3. I don't remember what year it was, but it was a Halloween night and it was a weekend as well. We had one creepy old house in our town that we have always found dark and creepy. No one lives there. Neither anyone visits it. On that night, my friend Jacob and I decided to do something scary. and that ended up being a visit to that abandoned, creepy house way up the road from our house. It was at the top of the hill, and people of our town referred to it as the haunted house, simply because it's all by itself on an enclosed property, and it had been abandoned for years. So, after collecting some sweets, we thought of going to that house. We got on our bicycles, rode up the road, and parked the bicycles in the dirt outside of the property. We walked up the hill to the house, and even just seeing the unlit house standing in the dark gave me goosebumps. We both came with backpacks full of tools like flashlights and knives just in case, and he even brought a crowbar. Surprisingly, he didn't need it though, because the front door was already cracked open. This is where the flashlights came in because, of course, the inside was as dark as it gets. The house seemed to be scrapped for just about everything, because nothing was left except junk. Nothing very exciting. Then there was a thump from upstairs. Jacob and I looked at each other, and we agreed to go upstairs and check it out. He led the way up the stairs, which were extremely rickety. He got to the top, and there was a small hall with 3 doors. We passed the first room, which was a tiny bedroom with an old collapsed bed frame still in there. There was a second door on the left, and this one led us to an empty bathroom. There was one more door, this one on the right of the hall. We stepped inside. This bedroom was the master bedroom. There was a bed frame sitting in the center of the room, still there. There was once carpet on this wood floor which had been ripped away over the years. We stepped fully inside the room, looking for what could have made the thumping sound. Then the door to the room slammed shut. There was suddenly a white flash that filled the room, then another. It seemed like camera flashes. Jacob screamed and opened the door back up to flee the room. I did the same. Neither of us looked for whoever was in there with us at the moment. We were way too scared. We ran back to our bicycles and went back to our house. A week later, Jacob sent me a picture through text. It was a picture of him holding a photograph. In the picture, it was of the 2 of us in that bedroom of the house. He said they were left under the windshield wiper of his parents' car in the parking lot. I told him to throw them away and keep it a secret. We only told a few close friends about this, and we never went near that house again. Thanks for watching The Haunted Sketchbook. Be sure to check out any of the videos on screen right now if you're planning on not sleeping tonight.